So developers are responsible for the code, and designers are responsible for the users. Is that right? Well, no. Contrary to popular belief, designers and developers have a very similar job. They are both responsible for solving problems for their users. So consequently, the existence of a user experience designer on a team does not mean that developers are not accountable for the user's well-being. Developers make design decisions daily, and they have a significant impact on the experience, but that impact is not always obvious. Error messages, instructions, validations, edge cases, exceptions handling, accessibility and performance are all things that have been designed, but oftentimes not by the designer. So good news, we're all designers. But bad news, the decisions that we make daily have real-life consequences. Bad design decisions can harm, anger, infuriate, exclude, cause injustice, and even kill users. In medical school, the first thing that students are taught is primum non nocere, or in English, first do no harm. This immediately reinforces the fact that as a physician, you have a lot of power on a person's life. By contrast, the first thing that I was taught in design school was how to draw in 3D. And I've been told that some developers, the first thing they learned in school was binary code. And if they were lucky, they had a single 3-hour-long class on user experience, and the teacher probably called this human-computer interaction. But don't worry, I did a 4-year program in design without ever seeing the word UX. The problem is that we are not taught in school that design has the power to shape technology and the world we live in. And as Spider-Man's Uncle Ben would tell us, with great power comes great responsibility. So here's one thing we're not taught in school. Bad design decision can kill. And I mean that not in a metaphorical way, like next time I see a Comic Sans poster, I might kill myself or a kitten or any other variation of this. I mean it in a very real way. So in our office, we have a wiki page that outlines the emergency procedures. And in it, we learned that there are 2 types of alarms if there was to be an emergency. The first alarm, we're told, will tell you that you should be prepared to evacuate if there is something, but you don't need to leave the office right away. The second type of alarm tells you that you should evacuate right now. So we're going to do a little test. Don't evacuate. But I'm going to play one of the 2 alarms. And by a show of hands, tell me if you would just prepare your things or if you would leave the building. So, would you leave the building? Wow, I'm sorry to say most of you would have died right now. So this is obviously a very terrible sound design solution. But there are other ways that bad design decisions can kill. And this is what happened on April 10, 2014. A stranger had been trying to crawl into a woman's house. He tried the windows and the doors, and when he finally made it, crawled into the living room, the woman grabbed a kitchen knife and scared him away. No one died. So you must wonder, like, if the woman heard the guy trying to come into her house, why didn't she call the police? Well, she did. She actually dialed 911 37 times that day, but it was always busy. For 6 hours that night, the entire population of Washington had no emergency service. In that house, no one was injured. But a 40-year-old man called Marlon Somariba was not as lucky. When he collapsed that night and his father realized, he immediately called 911. He wasn't really lucky, obviously he got a busy signal, so he went to his neighbors and asked his friends and family to call 911 for them. But it didn't work. And the man unfortunately died from a medical condition that would have been easily treatable had he reached the hospital on time. So what caused that outage? Was it a bad software update or a patch? No. Was it a cyber attack? Not at all. It was actually a very simple design mistake. And when we learn about these mistakes, it's easy to cast blame. But these designers and developers working on these softwares are really no different than you and me. They're not better and they're not worse. So traditionally, when we study design mistakes, for example, why a bridge would collapse or a plane would crash, we would try to identify the weakest link, the thing that caused the whole thing to break. But software doesn't break. The reason this software failed is that it was designed to do the wrong thing. So at one point, the programmer working for Intrado, the faulty server system provider, he had to set a threshold on how many calls could be uniquely identified before being dispatched all around the country. That threshold was arbitrarily set at 40 million. So when the counter exceeded that number on April 10, all new calls were rejected because they couldn't be identified, resulting in busy signals for everyone. That was a failure of imagination. No one imagined that they would reach that number. So the complex system we are building manages parts of our lives that are way more vital than ever. Therefore, it's important to plan for what we can't see, to design for a wide range of user scenarios.